Hello, good evening. All right. So now I've said hi to you also, Nyaniso, and I'm going to switch off my camera.
Good evening, Charita. How are you?
How are you?
I'm all right.
I am good. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So we are starting with the Constitution. So we're not going to go into too much detail in this specifically. Okay, I'm going to go through it with you, but I want to get to what's coming up afterwards. So industry obviously has a number of regulations and legalities that needs to be complied with, just like all other industries. Some of these rules are laws, so radio stations are obligated by the government legislation to adhere to them, but some of them are more like guidelines, okay? It's not a enforced rule. So for instance, the Advertising Regulatory Board, which we're going to look at, the National Association of Broadcasters, which we'll look at, and the BCCSA, Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. It's not a law, but it's guidelines, and the ARB and the BCCSA have a lot in common, okay? So both of these are bodies that you can go to if you want to either complain about a certain advert for some reason, or if you want to complain about something that's been said, if it perhaps attacks your constitutional rights in some way, okay? So they are more like editorial policies and the Broadcasting Code of Conduct. So our Constitution, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, 1996, serves as the foundation for our nation to operate as a democratic country, free of oppression and discrimination. So this is very important. The Constitution also contains our Bill of Rights, which states that every South African citizen has the right to life, equality, human dignity, and privacy. That's why whenever I see people protesting and saying that someone needs to get the, what do you call it? See, my brain is dead tonight. The death penalty, then I'm like, we can't have a death penalty because our Constitution states that everyone has the right to life in this country. So unless the Constitution changes, that won't change. Whenever laws are made by Parliament, they need to comply with our Constitution. So just a bit of background, some legal facts. It's a little bit of political science here. Parliament is our country's national legislator, which means that it has the power to create laws that are guided by the Constitution once again. So Parliament is established to be a representative of the people who vote political parties into office next year, important election year. The members of the Parliament are charged with overseeing and promoting adherence to values that are enshrined in our Bill of Rights. Parliament is also charged with ensuring independence, accessibility, impartiality, and effectiveness of state institutions. So if you listen to the news on SABC, when the news starts, it'll always say something like SABC News, independent and impartial, okay? The stuff. Anyway, so who are set up to monitor and enforce certain types of legislation in the media environment. So our Constitution can be changed, but like I said, it takes the 2/3 majority vote in Parliament to change our Constitution, which puts the burden of having a strongly representative Parliament with our voting public. So we've gotten close to it, but it hasn't happened. So in terms of media, there are often debates around whether certain laws that are being passed may be imposing on the right to privacy, specifically in the media sector. So Section 14, for instance, of the Bill of Rights states that everyone's right to privacy includes the right to not have the privacy of their communications infringed on. So if you want to, as a media entity, post about, I don't know, let's say someone's pregnant, they don't want anyone to know, and you find out and you post about it, that pretty much like talks about this, talks to this. So there are some interesting debates around this specific section. And as the internet is becoming more universal, more people with varying degrees of education or have access to it. And there are adjustments that need to be made regarding to how content is regulated and monitored to ensure that radio stations and other players in the media industry communicate both responsibly and accountably, as all businesses are required to do under our constitution. So they need to make sure that we are still regulated and monitored and that we don't do stuff we shouldn't do. So having groups of independent bodies and media operators that support them is important to challenge and promote certain types of ongoing legislations. Then Section 16 of the Bill of Rights outlines the importance of a free press in a democratic South Africa. So it's interesting. Here we talk about Section 14, which says that everyone's right to privacy includes the right to not have the privacy of their communication infringed on. But then Section 16 of the Bill of Rights outlines specifically the importance of a free press in a democratic South Africa. So this also protects the right of media organizations to freely receive and impart information and to exhibit and promote artistic creativity. It does, however, stipulate that these freedoms do not extend to the following important 3 exclusions. Firstly, propaganda and war. Secondly, incitement of imminent violence. And lastly, advocacy of hatred based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion, and that which constitutes incitement to cause harm. Okay, so these things are the only stuff that from a media perspective, in essence, we are not allowed to, or our freedom rather doesn't extend to these exclusions. The Constitution also enables a process of lawmaking in Parliament for legislation specifically designed to guide the media industry. So there's also a specific process behind this. And these laws can be passed at any time through the lawmaking process. We went through something similar when we had COVID. Okay, so during COVID, something similar happened. Especially with regards to when we had to wear masks or when we weren't allowed to leave our houses, when we had curfew, etc. It had to go through this whole process that I'm going to take you through now, the 9 steps. Firstly, we get a green paper. So this is a discussion document that's drafted by the ministry that's dealing with a certain issue. Let's say the Minister of Water and Sanitation decides that a new dam needs to be built in this area because they want to close another dam, whatever it might be. So in the case of media, it would be the Department of Communications, or actually the name has changed to the Department of Communications and Telecommunications. The green paper outlines the general approach to what the issue is and how it can be legally dealt with. Okay, so that's where it starts. It's then published for comments and suggestions internally, so not externally to the public. Secondly, you get your white paper. This is an updated document that's more refined, and it takes into account the comments that people have given and suggestions that were received during the pay period that the green paper was published. It's a broad statement for the intended it's a broad statement of the intended policy of what we want to do. Then you get the bill. So this is a draft version of the law drawn up by the relevant department and presented to Cabinet and then to Parliament by the relevant minister, deputy minister, or member of Parliament. Then it goes to number 4, National Assembly. So all bills must be presented to both houses of Parliament. So it needs to go to the National Assembly, the NA, and the National Council of Provinces, so the NCOP. Okay, it goes to both of these. Then it gets gazetted, so the Government Gazette. Once the Houses of Parliament receive this bill, it's published in the Government Gazette to elicit public opinion and comment. Problem here is that as much as this is made public, not everyone necessarily gets the Gazette or will look in the couple of newspapers, for instance, that they might post it in. So unless you're specifically, let's say, on the communications list to get these emails, you won't necessarily see all the gazettes that get published, okay? And I mean, this is your only chance where you're allowed to, or where you can rather, give your input and have your views heard. So this is quite an important section. From here, it moves to the committee. So the relevant committees will debate the bill in Parliament and update and amend it if necessary, taking into account what was said after the Government Gazette has been published. Then number 7, concurrence. This is where both houses of Parliament, so both the NA and the NCOP, need to sign off on the bill. Then number 8, President's assent. Here the President signs the bill, which now makes it a law of the land. Number 9, this bill is now an act of Parliament. Okay, that's literally, these are the 9 steps that it goes through from beginning to end for us to have a new bill, okay, brought in. So it's not by any means a quick or easy process to go through.
Sarita,
Yes.
the steps which involve the Government Gazette, step number 5.
Yes.
Why does that continue to be the only recognizable way of communicating with the public? Because I see the green paper, the white paper, the bill, and then the gazetting and government always pride himself as having communicated if it has published something in the Government Gazette. You saw on the COVID regulations, you
Yes.
saw when e-tolls were to be built, things like that, and yet it misses a lot of people. Why is there no interest or appetite by government to revise the manner of communication or the Gazette itself being made available in today's platforms like social media, for instance?
The gazettes are on their website. So you can find the latest gazettes updated on their actual website. But that's pretty much, yeah.
Still, yeah, how deliberate is government in ensuring that it goes out to everyone? Because if you navigate any government website, it's cumbersome, it's too formal, the information even there looks, it's like if you go to the Department of Labor website looking for information, it's very cumbersome.
And it's very formal also. I agree with you there in the way
Yes.
that it's set up.
The text is long. All they do when you get to the website, they scan these documents and store them on the website as they are.
Yes, that is what they do. You are 100% correct. Look, this isn't the first time this question has been raised in recent years. The problem is it's not so easy to go back and change this. Keep that in mind, that this process that they go through in itself, for it to be changed is a whole process. So I don't know, I don't work for them, so I can't give you exact details. I just know that it in itself is something that they need to that'll need to be debated and to go through, like, in essence, these steps for the way that they do this, the Government Gazette, to be changed. But I do agree with you. Like, I'm firmly a believer, I always have been, that people don't have the necessary public knowledge about the gazettes that happen. I'm one of the fortunate people that get them, so I'm aware of what happens, but it's only because I'm on the mailing system. So in essence, what they expect is that they mail it or they send it out to the all media entities, and that the media entities should disperse. But they also they're forced to they can't simply make any changes without publishing it in certain areas. So normally what they do is they buy space in community newspapers where they will publish this to make sure that more people are made aware of it. But that's about as much insight as I have currently for you with regards to the Gazette. I know that doesn't answer your question, But yeah, that's an interesting one. And if you find an answer, please let me know. But I know that pretty much what I know is that it's been up for debate for quite a few years. Okay. So 2 bodies of government in South Africa that regulate communication between individuals, the government, and the private sector are the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. So these are perhaps the guys, oh no, it's not. These are the guys to ask that question to. So we used to be the Department of Communications, okay, or we used to fall under them. But the name changed in 2019. So if you still see in your textbook that it refers to the DOC, it's just keep in mind it is no longer the DOC. It hasn't been since 2019. It's the DCDT, Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, that was established in June 2019 by the merger of the DOC and the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services, so the DTPS. So that's the first body of government that regulates communication. The second one is the GCIS, the Government Communications and Information System. So these are the guys that technically all tenders need to go through, or should actually see. Communications, all communications should go through them. So if you want to start a debate with someone, these are the correct guys to do it with. So apart from this, or not apart from this, if we have a look at the DCDT specifically in detail, there are a lot of entities that fall under them, okay? For instance, Brand South Africa, the FPB, the Film and Publication Board, which we're going to chat about now, ICASA, which you know, MDDA, which is the Media Diversity, what are the Media and Diversity and something agency, SABC, Broadband Infraco, NEMISA, so National Electronic Media Institute of South Africa, Centec, who does the who works with the transmission services, so transmitters in South Africa, SAPO, so the South African Post Office, SITA, State Information Technology Agency, Telkom, and USASA, so Universal Service and Access Agency of South Africa. So all of these fall under the DCDT, the Department of Communications and Digital Technology. Okay, again, a little bit different from your textbook because this is the updated stuff. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail at the moment, but I do, well, the Broadcasting Act, I mean, but I do want to show you this as we're going to chat about the FPB now, the Film and Publications Board of South Africa. So I'm not sure if you're aware of a change that was made last year. Oh no, I'm lying. Sorry, that came into effect in March. Yes, no, I'm correct. March last year, about the FPB. The Film and Publications Board. No idea? Okay. So, all right, so let me just quickly, can't open that as of yet. Hold on. Okay, so let's look at this. So I'm showing you a law site so that you can see it's credible. So the Films and Publications Amendment Act came into operation, like I said, last year, March. So this thing has been spoken about for a long time, okay? You can see that it was signed into law by the president and published in the Government Gazette on 2019 already. But it's it's finally been implemented last year. So what does this mean? Okay, it provides more clarity on the regulation of online commercial distributors and the processes that are required to follow to distribute content in South Africa. And then some of the changes like are here below. So for instance, prior to the FPAA, all distributors, including commercial online distributors, even though not expressly referred to in the FPA, had to register with the Films and Publications Board and then submit their content to the FPB for classification for a rating. So if you made a movie or a game, obviously you had to submit it to them so that they can go, okay, cool, this game is PG-13, for instance. So there was no specific recognition that VOD distributors could classify their content themselves. Once the content was classified, the VOD provider would then be required to display the FPB classification ratings, logo, and consumer advice on the content titles. Okay, so we're aware of this. So what has happened is that the approach was taken by the FPB in practice to require online distributors to pay an online license fee of 795,000 Rand per year. This was later regulated under the Film and Publications amended tariff regulations in 2020, and payment decided on a per title basis. I mean, that's a lot of money if it wasn't per title to spend every single year. Okay, and conclude an agreement with the FPB dealing with how classification would be done, the rating standards that would be applied, and the training of people doing the rating, blah, blah. Okay, so lots of details. Okay, so now the FPAA provides for specific departures with permission for commercial online distributors from the ordinary requirements that apply to distributors. So in this regard, the FPAA introduces a number of definitions to cater for the online distribution of content. So specifically here, the definition of distribute has been broadened to include a reference to a game, as well as a film or publication, and includes streaming content through the internet. Okay, this is what's important here. Social media or other electronic mediums, and selling, hiring out, or offering or keeping for sale or hire content, including using the internet. So this means a lot for the media industry. Distributor is included to mean a person who conducts the business of distributing films, games, or publications, and includes a commercial online distributor. So this commercial online distributor is included to mean a distributor in relation to films, games, and publications, which are distributed for commercial purposes using the internet. So publications, okay, that use the internet. So the definition of a distributor does not include a non-commercial online distributor, which is defined to mean any people or any person who distributes content using the internet or enables content to be distributed by a user of an online service for a personal or private purpose. So if you use it for your own personal private purpose, you're fine. Film, game, and publication has been amended to include specific references to the internet. Okay, so it needs to be displayed, blah, 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 blah. What was the other stuff? So potentially contentious amendments. Complaints against prohibited content. So you can lodge a complaint if there's anything that you want to complain about, in essence, that goes against the Electronic Communications and Transactions Act. Okay, this is a law paper, and it goes on to be a law paper, and it talks a lot. ISPs, important also. So what I want to show you now, so this is just to start for you to get a little bit of background on the Films and Publications Board, because I want to talk to you now specifically, where is that now? Sorry, just give me a second. Nope. not that one. I had it open in front of me. Ah, there we go. Okay. So I want to refer to this now. Okay, so the FPB. We're going to get back to these beginning slides now, but just so that you know, we're looking at what's happening on page 496 at the moment. So Film and Publications Board, the locus of what we control in media, has moved away from regulating bodies such as the FPB because it's almost impossible to regulate. So the FPB is that content classification authority established by the Films and Publications Act under the Minister of Communications, or now DCDT. The FPB was born during the dismantling of apartheid's media censorship forces, which is quite interesting because in essence, what this thing is trying to do, or what they would like to do, is to censor content once again that's being posted by media entities. So its initial purpose was to classify content on traditional media in order to provide South Africans with proper advisories on how appropriate content is for audiences specifically. Obviously very important for kids, particularly relevant when it comes to voices such as children. And the FPB spearheads an important national anti-child pornography campaign designed to educate young people in schools about how to avoid victimization. So this is very important, and I agree with that part. The FPB aims to assist South African citizens to make informed choices about whether certain types of programming containing strong language, violence, sex, nudity, drug abuse, religious prejudice, or blasphemy is appropriate for their children to consume. Again, it's a good thing, right? The Minister of Communications requires that the FPB intervene when there is a risk of harmfulness to children, and indeed a large number of complaints is being received by them because of this concern. So they've traditionally been responsible for classifying film content on big media platforms, and this has empowered South Africans to decide whether you want to continue watching something, or more importantly, whether you want to allow your kids to watch something. But it can be argued, however, that the 2015 bill is heading for something closer to censorship, which is the bill that came in currently, and that's on page 496. They give you a big breakdown with regards to this. If I were to summarize it for you quickly, what they were looking at, okay, when they implemented this thing, is to have all media entities, any entity that makes money from things that they post, send their content through to the Film and Publications Act before it would be allowed to be posted online. Okay, so that's where the big debate came in, and whether this kind of entity is the correct entity to run something like this, because they fall under the government, right? So meaning that yes, there's some clarity to the regulation of online commercial distributors and the processes that they are required to follow, fine. And this introduction of a right of anyone to lodge a complaint with the FPB, I think, is really good, regarding unclassified prohibited content or potential prohibited content. The problem here is it may unjustifiably restrict free speech, which is part of our Constitution. So the prohibition of the distribution of content that may, in the FPB's assessment, amount to propaganda for war, incitement of imminent violence, or advocacy of hate speech, is likely to be viewed as online censorship, because they will then get to decide what you can and cannot post on the internet, all right? So that's pretty much what it comes down to. Yes, very interesting. And also, as part of this FPA Act that has come in, Section 24 and Section 27 of this Act warns that any person or online content provider who knowingly distributes or exhibits a game or publication that has been or that might have been classified as 18 to a person under the age of 18 years will be liable to a fine up to 750,000 Rand or face imprisonment not exceeding 5 years or both. Okay. Yeah, so it's quite an interesting one for me. Yes, especially the grave threat that this has to the constitutional right of freedom to express, to your expression in general, and also to the right of your privacy, as they can determine what forms of expression are allowed and not allowed online. Okay. So there's also a debate around people complaining that the FPB is overstepping their boundaries into the Independent Communications Authority, so ICASA, ICASA's jurisdiction, by appointing themselves as an arbiter rather, of what is and what is not protected speech online. Okay, so yes, that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you about the FPB. FPBS. Okay, so let's go on to a happier topic, unless you have any input on that law that came in last year, or on the bill rather.
No input, unless Jessica has some input. Jess?
I don't have it.
Okay. Right, so we just mentioned ICASA, so let's get back to ICASA. So in South Africa, we have two types of licenses, okay? Every single radio station that falls under ICASA has two licenses. One is the class license, the other is a spectrum license. So who is ICASA again? They are responsible for issuing broadcast licenses to everyone, to commercial, public, and community radio stations in South Africa. Any electronics thing will have some sort of a sticker on it that says ICASA, because any communication related thing, electronics thing, is regulated by them. So class license gives me more details with regards to your language, the amount of music that you broadcast, the amount of news that you do, your community service work that you do, etc., etc. Okay, versus my spectrum license, which is my broadcasting footprint. Okay, so spectrum, broadcast footprint. Spectrum is radio frequencies utilized by telecommunication, TV, radio stations, as well as a lot of other industries to provide digital services to customers, whoever they might be. These frequencies need to be specifically allocated, okay? As each frequency can only handle so much traffic. And there's only a limited amount of traffic bandwidth available for each frequency. So we know that there's a moratorium on licenses in South Africa. You can't get a new radio station license. Might have asked yourself why, and I might have explained a bit, but I think this will make it clearer. So we get three types of frequencies. So frequencies, those waves, right? So three types of those frequency waves that are broadcasted across a certain footprint by using a transmitter. So if we look at them, it's UHF, ultra high frequency, VHF, very high frequency, and SHF, which is super high frequency. Okay, start with ultra high frequency. That's used for TV broadcasting, cell phones, satellite communication, including GPS, personal radio services, including Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, walkie-talkies, cordless phones, satellite phones, etc. So the UHF radar band frequencies lie between 300 megahertz and 1 gigahertz. Okay, so that's used for all of these things. UHF radios operate at a higher frequency, which is ideally suited for things like wireless communications that need to penetrate buildings and walls, concrete, other barriers. So UHF can go through walls, hence why you can be in a room and speak on your phone. Okay. Interestingly enough, they put Wi-Fi in here, but Wi-Fi cannot go through a wall. Wi-Fi goes around a wall. Yes, just a random fact. Then you have very high frequency, which is electromagnetic waves from 30 to 300 megahertz. So wavelengths of between 1 to 10 meters. Okay, so small, quite small wavelengths. Radios with lower frequencies, so VHF, have longer wavelengths, making them ideal for work, or to work rather, across wide areas, free from obstruction, as well as outdoor use. Last one then, super high frequencies. So radio frequencies between 3 to 30 gigahertz. Okay, wavelengths ranging from 1 to 10 centimeters. So small, small, small. So if you look at these in terms of lengths, it should make sense that radio would fall here under ultra high frequency, right? But then we look at this super high frequency, like where we just were. This is used mostly for radar transmitters, wireless LANs, satellite communication, microwave radio relay links, satellite phones, the S-band phones, and other kinds of short-range terrestrial data links. Okay, so let's look at the radio frequency spectrum allocation chart for South Africa. This is legitly how much spectrum we use in South Africa, okay, and how it's broken up. So here's a picture that you can just see how all the batches have been broken up, okay, across South Africa. Okay, some areas way condensed. So here again, if we look here you can see the very high frequency. There you'll see aeronautic mobile, broadcasting. So think about a radio station that you listen to. It might be something like, let's say, I don't know, 92.6, right? That means it'll be like around here. But a lot of them lie here. And then there's your mobile. Then under ultra high frequency, also broadcasting here. Fixed and mobile, so fixed lines, mobile lines here, fixed mobile amateur lines there, radio location here. Super high frequency is so high you can't really see what's happening except for that little bit there. Okay, so very condensed, like there's no space in South Africa. So it's not just a case of there's no frequency available because there are too many radio stations. It's a case of there are too many other things that also need to run on the frequency, okay, on these frequency waves in South Africa. That's why we can't have more radio stations at the moment, and why it's so important that we need to bring DAB in, which, however, we have looked at, and we know that it's quite expensive for the government to run out, because everyone has the right to be able to access media. So if you have a radio, you should be able to get a DAB device. Okay. So that's where we're sitting at the moment. So I want to show you a couple of licenses. So spectrum license, again, it's the footprint. It's how far you stretch, how far you're allowed to broadcast in the area that you are in, okay? Whether you're South Africa or just here or just there or wherever, okay? So that is spectrum. So let's look at class. And which one shall we do? Let's have a look at, where is it now? Here. Hello. Right, so I'm going to show you Metro FM and YFM. Hold up. I actually have an updated 947. Okay. Where? Okay, here. All right, so here are 3 licenses that I'm going to show you now. Hello. Okay. The first is Metro. So this is an old one. Okay, you can see Feb 2017, which means that this license was from 2008 up until 2018. YFM's was from 2008 until 2018. 947's one was from 2018 and is valid up until 2028. So commercial radio stations get a license for 10 years. Community radio stations get a license for 5 years only, right? So that's one big difference between the two. So this is now the class license, not the spectrum license. And here it just tells you that it falls under ICASA, blah, 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 blah. It tells you that they fall under the SABC. Their language that they're broadcasting in is English, and they are in these areas in terms of their spectrum service, which will be in their spectrum license. Ownership and control, South African Broadcasting Corporation. Geographic coverage is as defined in the map attached to the radio frequency spectrum license. All right, so here you can already see it's 2 different licenses. Okay, English format. The license service shall be a sound broadcasting service in an urban contemporary format. So this radio station is an urban adult contemporary radio station. Or if we break it down even further, it's a hot urban contemporary format. What does that mean? It means, it refers to the kind of music that is played, okay? So where it's referred to here as urban contemporary means that they, for instance, won't play rock. They won't play classical music. They won't play country music. They will play anything that gets classified as urban, which is anything from R&B, soul, kwaito, hip hop, rap, boom, amapiano, house, Afropop, etc., etc., etc. Okay, that's what that refers to. This contemporary format, adult contemporary, means that it's older than a youth radio station's audience. So adult contemporary starts from 30 upwards, but because it's a hot adult contemporary radio station, average listeners 25 to 35. Okay, that's core group. Anyway, I think I'm giving you too much information. What they say here is that they need to have religious programs, and religious programs need to take account of regional factors, target audiences, language and cultural preferences, and the devotional needs of specific groups. So they have religious programs on a Sunday morning. Then they say the licensee must take reasonable steps to provide programming that reflects the cultural and tradition needs of their audience. And then they tell you that they had a show called Positive Talk with Griselda, which was current affairs in the evenings on Wednesdays and Thursdays from 7:30 to 9. Then they talk about news and current affairs. They need to do at least 30 minutes of news per day. And then they tell you how to break it down. And then there's an example of a news bulletin that you can find on their radio station. Okay, so then it just carries on. And this is the kind of stuff. Then they say they need to do training and skills development. The licensee must adopt and implement equal opportunity employment practice. And then they explain how to do it. Management and staff need to be broken down in a specific way. So there's a lot of stuff, like you can see, that they put in this class license. Here's their music content regulations. Minimum 25% South African. That is no longer true. That has gone up. But they play it on average 35%. 34%, I mean. Okay. So then it carries on. And here it states that they need to in essence, cater to people with disabilities also in certain ways. And then here they say they did disability awareness campaigns like National Blind Buddy Day. I'm pretty sure that should be Blind Buddy Day. Anyway, autism awareness, albinism awareness, deaf awareness, and casual day. Okay. And then it says that they need to pay an annual contribution of 0.2% of their annual turnover to the USAF fund, the Universal Service and Access Fund. This is very important because this money goes to the MDDA. Okay, here they mention it, MDDA, the Media Diversity Agency of South Africa, who every year grants certain grants to community radio stations in need of funding. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's the one. So YFM, on the other hand, also starts the same way. Give them a background, licensed to Wired Pty Limited. Okay, so that's who they fall under. Give you the geographic breakdown. They use Centec, primarily English, isiZulu, and Sesotho. Format of this license is a youth-based music service or youth-based focused service with an infotainment consisting 75% music, 25% talk. So what they are seen as is an urban CHR radio station, urban contemporary hit radio. So focus is on youth, okay? Urban youth, so urban top 40 kind of music in essence. This is not a lot. 25% talk is not a lot. Anyway. Then they speak about their local content obligations. They need to ensure that at least 50% of their songs are South African. I think they play more than 60 when it comes to it. Okay, so they didn't. Yes, they broadcast an average of 65% South African music per day. And then they have general obligations like the news. They need to do a minimum of 40 minutes every day. So Metro was on 30 minutes a day. Y is on 40 minutes a day. If I showed you UJFM, UJ is on way more, like 80 minutes of news per day, which is very interesting as it's a campus station. Anyway, then it goes on to give you more information about them, ownership and control. So the licensee shall establish a scheme in terms of which staff are allocated 5% equity or profit participation. This is interesting for me. So YFM staff can get a bonus payment in December as part of their profit participation. They are their control is 100% owned by Sabido Investments. Training and skills, so they need to you spend a certain amount of money every year on training and skills development, so more than 400,000 Rand, and they must focus on equitable gender, blah, 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 blah. Then they have community-related obligations, need to provide at least 1 million Rands worth of airtime annually to relevant organizations for the purpose of providing free social responsibility messaging. So they use, for instance, cancer. Music regulations, yeah, we've looked at that. Again, USAF, you're going to see this for every single commercial radio station. Every commercial radio station in this country pays 0.2% of their annual turnover over to the USAF contribution, which then gives the funds to the MDDA. Oh, there we go. Development. That's the word I was forgetting. The Media Development and Diversity Agency. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the last one. So this is an updated one. This is 947's one up until 2028. So another 5 years to go. And blah, 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 blah. Their ownership and control is very interesting compared to the others. So Metro, we know, is part of the SABC. YFM, Wired FM, 100% owned by one company, Sabito Investments. 947, however, split up. So 46.61% of 947 shares are owned by the Mine Workers Investment Company, which I think is really interesting. Kirsch Consortium, they have owned massive shares. It's a family in South Africa, a Jewish family that's got a lot of money. They own 23.8%. Braid entities 18%, management stake 5%, Titan share dealers 2 point something, Subvest together with BPESAM almost 1%, KV and GR Direct 1.9%. So you can see no one from a media background in here. 46.61% historically disadvantaged group. That's this. Okay, majority of shares there. So then they give you details and tell you where they are. Name of the station. So it's interesting that they call themselves 947. Okay, they officially rebranded quite a few years ago, but their name on ICASA, on their ICASA license, is still 94.7 Highveld Stereo. Okay, then they show you where they are based in their Spectrum license, broadcast language, English, format. Shall have a programming mix of talk and music in an adult contemporary format. So AC, once again, similar to Metro FM. The only difference between the two is that Metro has the word urban in it as well, where 947 doesn't. Providing for a mix of music and information, including community affairs. Do you see that here they don't give them a breakdown, however, of percentages? That's different. Okay, so what do they need to do? They need to have at least 8 local music concerts per year. So this is why there are so many concerts. Okay, yeah. So general programming, they need to do at least 30 minutes of news per day and show you how they do the news. Training and development, they need to allocate 350,000 Rand per annum to training and development, which I think is really low. But they have delivered a few different training interventions at a cost of 4.1 million. So then they have community related obligations, raise at least 250,000 Rand in cash and goods annually. They brought in 1.08 million. Beneficiary African Tikan, 600,000. Uitkoms Home for Girls, Claw, Avram Creel, Banani Home, and Tembalami Care Center. So that's how they raised funds. Provide airtime with 250,000 upwards to blah, 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 all these people. And they raised, or they gave out airtime to the value of 2.3 mil. Again, the whole big breakdown of every single person who received funding. Can I just tell you, this thing's like, that's small like this, right? That's pretty much like, that's nothing. It's like an interview and yeah, maybe 2 interviews or like a couple of, not even that many, like 2 or 3 live reads or spots. So these small amounts doesn't amount to a lot. Anyway, then it carries on, and then they speak about the regulations in terms of complaints. So then music content, so revised from 25% to 35%. Okay, so 35%, similar to what Metro now would be. Actually, I think Metro has been moved up to 65%. Anyway, So 35% local, and then it just continues to break it down, okay? Again, the money that goes to the MDDA. So this should give you a good idea of what the class licenses specifically look like, okay, in terms of their breakdowns. Because there is a question on your assignment with regards to licenses and ICASA and interesting things like that. Okay. Right. Any questions so far?
I wanted to find out, Charita, as you were going
Yes.
through the licenses, an example came to mind. There was an abrupt end to the ENN7's contract by
To whose contract?
ANN7, sorry,
Oh, yes, yes.
which had later branded to Afroworld View. So what had happened, the television station that was bought from the Guptas, I'm sure you remember. Then, so DSTV ended the station altogether because it was broadcasting on that platform. So as you go through the different types of licenses, I couldn't help but to wonder, in a setup like DSTV, who holds the license? Let's say I establish a radio station, sorry, a TV, a platform,
Yes.
which then it's a fully fledged television that uses a multi-choices platform so that it's on DSTV. In a situation like that, who owns the license? Is it DSTV or is it me? And does that mean DSTV can abruptly terminate the license if it's DSTV owns it? I just want to understand from a business point of view, how do such agreements get reached?
Interesting question. So multi-choices ownership, they are form part of the you can buy shares, okay? They are on the public shares group. So they have, similarly to 947, who has a lot of people who own shares. Yes, you can literally buy and trade shares because they form part of the stock exchange market. But there are big corporations who owns, like, for instance, 14%, or I think it's Vivendi who owns something like 26% of the stakes. M&G Investment Managers owns like 3.5%. MultiChoice themselves, MultiChoice has a group restricted share plan for people who work in MultiChoice, who've been there for certain years, have gotten seen as great workers, etc., who also get shares. So something like 2.8% of the shares are distributed amongst MultiChoice workers themselves. So there's no one person who can say, cool, let's shut down MultiChoice, because they have a board of directors, of which a guy called Imtiaz Patel is the chairperson, and they have CEOs, CFOs, they have a couple of non-executive directors, and again, like I said, shareholders, and an executive team, etc., who all form part of this thing. So it's not like one person can say, let's close MultiChoice. And remember, when you're talking about DSTV, you're speaking about MultiChoice, but you're also talking about, for instance, SuperSport, but also MultiChoice in itself owns a couple of other groups apart from simply Mnet and DSTV Media Sales. They also have MultiChoice Africa Holdings. They have Showmax Africa. They also own a company called Ardato. Yes, I actually know someone at MultiChoice. That's why I know so much about MultiChoice as well overall. But no, so there's no, it can't simply be shut down. A channel on its own can, yes, because viewership might be exception or might be low, or there can be a lot of reasons for it. Oh yes, they also own Namola, they own stakes in BetKing, so betting websites. So MultiChoice has stakes in a lot of different entities.
So channels that broadcast through MultiChoice don't have a license with ICASA. For instance,
They shouldn't
if I am
need
to
no.
if I am to approach MultiChoice with a specific channel, not a show, not a production,
Yes.
but a channel. Let's say, I don't know what is the last channel there. I've never heard of 162. I'm not sure if there's 162 or 160 as an example. Let's say I need to have a channel 160, and this channel is going to be doing 1, 2, 3. Do I as a channel creator, for lack of a better word, get to have a relationship with ICASA, or I approach MultiChoice, and MultiChoice with its, I assume, broad license to do different things with it, then says, okay, I have a slot available, and indeed a channel like this. So who gets to have a relationship with ICASA? Is it me as a channel owner, or MultiChoice as a platform that is made available for me to broadcast my channel?
So it's DSTV as a platform, okay? So they have a license with ICASA, but they do get channel authorization. So they do submit. So MultiChoice will submit channel authorizations to ICASA before a new channel is introduced. So you won't do it, but MultiChoice would do it.
Okay. So
Or
meaning
DSTV
I will make
would
my
do it.
application from MultiChoice or DSTV.
You apply for a channel on DSTV, yes. And then if they decide it's something that they want to look into, ICASA, well, DSTV will need to chat to ICASA.
Oh, okay, it makes sense.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm not going to go on too much further. I just quickly want to recap a couple of things here with you. So once again, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa 1996 serves as the foundation for the nation to operate as a democratic country, free of oppression and discrimination. Parliament is also charged with ensuring independence, accessibility, impartiality, and effectiveness in terms of the media. And there are often debates around whether certain laws, like I've told you about the FPB, that are being passed may be imposing on this right to privacy. Then Section 16 of the Bill of Rights outlines the importance of a free press in a democratic South Africa. It also protects the right of media organizations to freely receive and impart information and to exhibit and promote artistic creativity. This exactly is what the FPB is contravening. Anyway, it does, however, like I've mentioned, stipulate that these freedoms do not extend to propaganda and war, incitement of imminent violence, advocacy of hatred based on race, ethnicity, gender, and religion, and that which constitutes incitement to cause harm. And there is specifically a Broadcasting Act, which I don't want to go into too much detail now because there's a question on your assignment with regards to this. So I want to go into that in a lot more detail next week, Monday, because I want to go through your assignment again then while doing that. But just briefly, the Broadcasting Act, founded on the principles of freedom of expression and the independence of journalistic, creative, and programming services of broadcasters, which are guaranteed by the Constitution. This Broadcasting Act recognizes that there are public, commercial, and community elements, so all 3 radio stations within the country's broadcasting system that use analog radio frequencies. Where you see analog or terrestrial, it means FM. So frequency modulator, meaning waves, okay? So analog, terrestrial, FM, same thing, which are public property. So no one owns the radio frequencies in South Africa. You might pay for a license to use specific frequencies, but it is public property, the frequencies. So all stations are therefore obligated to provide a public service that maintains South Africa's identity, universal access to their information and entertainment, and the constitutional principles of unity, equality, and diversity. This is the directive that ICASA uses when issuing licenses and when they are reviewing the consortiums that are applying for these licenses. And ICASA is the independent body set up to enforce, nice error there, to enforce the Broadcasting Act. Okay, so they, ICASA, need to make sure that the Broadcasting Act is being upheld. So the Broadcasting Act stipulates that as a collective, commercial radio stations must provide a diverse range of programming in all 11 official languages of South Africa. Yes, I know we have 12 official languages, but seeing as the 12 is sign language, it does not fall in with radio stations. So this is the directive that ICASA uses when issuing these licenses and when reviewing it once again. The Act states that stations must meet the highest standards of journalistic professionalism and integrity. Broadcasting Act specifies that public broadcast has their own mandate. There's a whole specific mandate, which is encompassed by a charter. Okay, SABC has a whole list of things that they have to adhere to, that they fall under with their mandate. So the charter mandates the SABC to meet the broadcasting needs of all South Africans. The SABC board is charged with the control and direction of the SABC on behalf of the public. But the Minister of Communications, or rather now the Minister of the DCDT, is the 100% shareholder, meaning the board of the SABC and its executive management is directly accountable to the Minister of Communications. So in essence, ICASA is responsible for issuing broadcast licenses to commercial, public, and community radio stations in South Africa. And there are 2 types of licenses, class and spectrum, which we've also spoken about now. Quick question. What is the difference between a PCS and a PBS in terms of stations?
Sorry,
PCS and PBS.
Public broadcasting station, public commercial station.
There we go. Okay, so both of these fall under the SABC. Okay, but the SABC has public broadcasting radio stations, and then they have public commercial radio stations. Public commercial radio stations, there are only 3 in South Africa. 5FM, Good Hope FM, and Metro FM. That's the only 3 PCS radio stations in South Africa. Like I was saying, we know now that ICASA has 2 different types of licenses. I told you now that there are 3 PCS stations. The rest are public broadcaster radio stations. Why did I tell you that? Because there's a question about that on your assignment. So then, in accordance with the Electronic Communications Act, okay, ICASA is responsible for issuing broadcast licenses to all the radio stations in South Africa. A license in this context is a formal permission that's granted to an individual or a group of individuals to broadcast on South Africa's airwaves. So from time to time, they will issue warnings to unlicensed users of the frequency spectrum, but also if you are non-compliant, they can take you off the air. Okay, so there has been a couple of years back, there was a big hoo-ha because they took off a couple of community radio stations who were non-compliant, but they did give them a couple of months to become compliant and then put them back on air. These unlicensed users here that we're referring to is aimed at illegal users who are knowingly and unlawfully modifying the radio apparatus to operate outside of their license-free band. There is a license-free band that lies between 2.4 gigahertz and 5.6 gigahertz. That's it, okay? Broadcasting outside of these frequencies requires a license from ICASA, which is pretty much where everyone else is. The notice also advises the public that users who operate without the necessary license could have their equipment confiscated and could be taken to court. So they're quite strict on people who don't have licenses. Okay.
Narita,
Yes.
are these frequencies infinite?
No. So
So
that's yes.
Yes.
So that's what I showed you earlier. That slide with the ultra high frequencies and the very high frequencies.
Yes.
That shows you that it's not infinite. That's it. There are only so many waves that can be used.
So it looks like people are not applying as frequent for these licenses if we still have some remaining, or is it because it's difficult to apply for a license and ultimately get one of the frequencies, or what's happening?
It's not difficult to apply if you have the correct reasons and there's a need, then they would have given it to you. But there's a moratorium because there is no space. There's no frequency available.
Wow.
Because have you sat in a car and heard two radio stations play over each other?
Yes.
That means frequencies are overlapping. Okay? Because remember, everyone, cell phones, computers, DSTV, everything uses waves. So there's no space available because they have to leave space for things like submarines and SOS signals and things. So yes, in essence, to answer your question, it's not that they don't want to apply or that they don't want to give it out or that it's too difficult. It's that there literally is no space.
Lastly, SABC is enjoying some subsidy, right, from government.
3%.
Why does it look like community radio stations are left to fend for themselves?
They're not. That's why the MDDA exists.
But often these community radio stations don't have the required budget. Like if you're going to be doing an interview with them, they tell you to call in because they can't sustain a call over a period of time because they don't have the required airtime.
Oh, I know you. So what you must remember is SABC is a public broadcaster, just like the BBC is a public broadcaster. Okay, so all of these stations across the world, they are public broadcasters, and the public broadcasters all get funded a percentage of their funds by government. In fact, our 3% is very low, especially taking into consideration that the rest of the funding should come from, well, advertising as one, but secondly, from the TV licenses that people are not paying, because people don't understand that TV licenses don't only go to TV SABC radio stations, TV SABC stations. It also needs to cover the SABC radio station costs.
Okay.
So they're actually underfunded. Okay.
No, okay. Yes.
How would you apply for one if you could? There's forms that you complete and you submit it onto their portal, and they would have previously called for applications, and they would have sent out an invitation for people to be able to apply for licenses to specific requirements. So, for example, whatever, a radio station in the Northwest province that predominantly broadcasts in Afrikaans, or a radio station in Pretoria for, let's say, Venda or Zulu-speaking people, whatever it might be. Relevant applicants then needed to apply for that license, and as an applicant, you would put forward your business plan of how you intend to provide the service and how you will financially sustain it, as well as details regarding their ownership, specifically with regard to previously disadvantaged groups. So this all is needed for you to apply. Okay. So if we look at what is an independent regulator, we've started looking at a couple of them now. So independent regulators are agencies of the government that are set up through legislators to implement and enforce specific laws, like ICASA, NAB, BCCSA, ARB, etc. They have quasi-legislative functions, meaning that they have an application that's invoked by the law in the absence of a specific agreement. I don't sign a contract with, for instance, the BCCSA. I don't sign a contract with the ARB, okay? Because I don't need to, because the law's already there, okay? The law is in place. These guys are just there to make sure the law is being enforced. So this means that the independent regulator has a legal duty when no specific promise or agreement was entered into by the parties involved, because we have a constitution. By instituting rules and regulations, independent regulators are acting as, or in a quasi-legislative capacity, as mentioned. And independent regulatory agencies service two functions. Firstly, to implement laws passed through the legislative system of Parliament, and secondly, to enforce those laws. The actual regulations or rules, however you want to see it, are the means by which the independent regulators implement those laws for a specific industry or activity. So from a radio perspective, there are a number of different independent regulators that we've spoken about, but we need to start looking at them from a compliance point of view in the field of music, advertising, and general content that it broadcasts to South Africans. So we have a couple of independent regulators in terms of music, and then in terms of advertising, there's a marketing and an advertising board. General content will be the BCCSA of South Africa. Okay. I actually want to stop here for today before I go into, because the next lesson we will be looking at these all together. Okay, are you happy with that, or do you feel like you haven't received enough information yet?
No. We are happy. I feel like I'm about to own a radio station.
Well, if not a radio station, then a multi-choice DSTV channel, eh?
You know, I really feel like I'm about to own one. I was saying to Jessica during the break, so much radio.
I'm sorry, it's my passion, so I'm filled with
Yeah.
Yes, it shows. You sound like.
okay. Well, I'm glad, even when I'm tired.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're going to stop here, and we will continue with the independent regulators next week, and then we'll also go through those specific sections on the assignment.
Tell me, Charita, why there does seem to be an invested effort and energy into radio and television as mediums in the media space, while there's other options that seem to be actually, well, sort of popping up, like your podcasts and your YouTube channels. Why do those not feature as studies in the media space?
Do you know what's interesting in what you're saying now? TV advertising has actually gone down. For the
Exactly.
first time.
So,
what it comes down to is, remember, you have what we call mass media or traditional media, which is TV, radio, and print. This includes digital print, okay? Mass media means majority of people see it. These three are still the most trusted forms of media that you find. You refer to a podcast. Podcast is made for a certain type of individual. It's a niche target market, meaning much smaller than traditional media is.
Isn't that what makes it niche, is because of internet accessibility or lack thereof?
No.
All you
So
would need for
niche
these
means
platforms.
no. So if it's, for instance, you have a podcast specifically for talking about current events.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. So you would cover a specific segment of society, because it's not a 24-hour clock, so it doesn't have space or capacity to cover everything. It would focus on a specific type of information. I see what you're talking about.
Okay, so certain subjects, which means only certain people are interested in it, meaning that I will reach a much smaller audience. In saying that, however, a lot of people are advertising on YouTube. Digital advertising is large. It's just, you must remember, when it comes to the internet, you can advertise on Google search, you can advertise on Bing, on Yahoo, on whatever channel you want there. There's search engine optimization where you charge for keywords. Then there's social media sites. Then there's so many different platforms available to you. It might seem to you like they're not spending big on digital, but I can tell you they are.
Okay. No, I get you.
So then we're going to leave this here for tonight, and we shall carry on next Monday.
Perfect.
Thank you, Sarita.
It's a pleasure. Thank you both for joining, and have a good week.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.